Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello, and welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share the experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. Whether you're a seasoned pilot, training for a rating, or just thinking about getting started in aviation, we like to think of the podcast as your aviation companion and your weekly dose of aviation inspiration. My name's Ben. I'm a pilot with an IFR rating and a commercial certificate. I'm based in the metro Atlanta area, flying a Cessna 182, I like to call the Beast. Joining me tonight, as always, because we record on Monday nights at 8 p.m., a private pilot in Nashville, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie, flying a Cherokee 180 named Lucy deep in the heart of Music Row, our friend Brian. Hello, sir.
Well, hello and good evening to everyone. I'm glad to have us all together here for the new year. And yes, we can pretend that we've created all these new aspirations that we're going to stick to and do better. And we'll fall back into our old patterns probably about another couple of weeks. But for now, I'm very optimistic.
I like your optimism. A couple of weeks is pretty strong for me, but right now we're getting off to a good start so far. Also joining us, as always, sport pilot extraordinaire based in Portlandia, flying a flight design CTLS we like to call the Egg. I don't know that he likes it, but we do. It's our friend Ted. Good evening, sir.
Hey there. And I love it. It's
good.
It's the best description of the plane possible. Yeah.
It really is. Flying eggs.
Yes.
This is episode 110. If anybody was wondering, we're talking about some techie stuff, useful apps for aviationing. And we got a lot to get into tonight. We do. If you didn't listen to the last episode, you can go ahead and pause now and go back and listen to that episode. But for the time being, we are excited to announce the Big Texas Send of 2025, May 2nd through the 4th at Tango 82, which is Gillespie County Airport in Fredericksburg, Texas. I can't tell you how excited I am about this. It's been occupying my mind ever since we made the announcement. Please, we would love to have you come. We need RSVPs. We need RSVPs. We need RSVPs. You can do so at midlifepilotpodcast.com. And Brian, we've gotten off to a pretty good start so far with the RSVPs.
Well, I have to say, you never know when you're, especially because we were mixing it up to be in a different region of the country this time around. You never know what the response is going to be. And I think that we were cautiously optimistic about the response. And typically these things are a wave and they build up time. 5 months out, is a long time, right? So you want to get it out there and get all the arrangements made, but at the same time, you want to, take it as it comes, I guess, right? And we've been getting, it's been wild. So there's already going to be about 40 people there. And even if half of those people actually make it, which I don't, these RSVPs are very specific. So I believe that all of them have the full intention of making it. But if we're sitting here the first week of January and this is 5 months away and we've got that much interest, then I'm starting to feel a little bit how we felt with the last Nashville fly-in, where it was sort of a feeling of, what have we done? And are we really, is this...
Yeah, we got in over our heads.
Yeah. But we applied those lessons from the Nashville, the last Nashville fly-in, which went great. But it definitely took some scrambling. And that's the value of having it at Tango 82, Fredericksburg. There's a lot of people that want to go there that are not pilots. It's such a desirable place to visit, all these wineries, and it's just a beautiful place, German food and town and everything and all that. But to be on the airport at the hangar hotel with the airport diner and everything all right there, plenty of facilities and all of the pieces that you need to keep people in one place and have a good time. It's all there. So I'm beyond excited. Yeah, it's been astounding to see. And for the audio audience, you're not going to see, but we made a little ticker that's going across the screen right now of our sort of the numbers, and we'll keep running this. You know, how many? I like seeing what different planes are coming. You know.
Yeah. I'm distracted. It's like, oh wait, there's a twin Comanche coming, a T210. Oh, those are some unique planes for us. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
These events are kind of, we consider them a success if we can show up and have a good time. The fact that there's a lot of other people interested is fantastic. And that's how the last Nashville one was. There were about 30 people there, and it was just a great time, except running out of food at lunch. But that was a great time.
Well, the thing too is that we were reticent maybe at first to say for sure that we would do a live show. We're definitely doing a live podcast. We're working out the details now. And who knows, there might even be some other special guests and some other things. And like we mentioned, there might even be something more useful than us doing a live episode, which might even be some instructor-led session, perhaps, that would be something that people could choose to do. So there's just a bunch of, it's just going to be great. Super excited. And please go to midlifepilotpodcast.com. You can see the incredibly rich information that we have put together so far that we're continuing to sort of adapt as we go. One little detail that we've been meaning to put in here that we will update is the hangar hotel. They obviously cater to pilots. They know aviation and they understand safety. And so one of the coolest things about this is everybody we've talked to that has RSVP so far. By the way, we've blown through the block that we set up, and then they're still giving people the block rate generally, I think, is what's happening. Yeah. It's not a drastic savings, but it is some savings. And I think that they're just happy to accommodate us and all that. But the thing I wanted to say is that they are telling everybody that calls, you have to call to get the block rate, and they'll probably give it to you. If you call, they will tell you that their cancellation policy is, what did they say, Ben?
It's 48 hours. And if you're flying in and the weather is bad, you can cancel your hotel room the day of and there'll be no charge.
How cool is that?
Yeah. I mean, there's no risk, basically, financially, for you to make a reservation and put it on your calendar and get your butts over to Gillespie County, Texas, and come say hi.
Well, I just feel better knowing that no one is going to be unnecessarily putting pressure on themselves to get there for at least that reason.
Right. Totally agree. And one more thing on that topic, I was actually playing around with some routes, and there was one that I really liked, and it's going down to the lake. I think it was down there. Drawing a blank on the name of it. And then flying back north to, is it Llano, where the barbecue place is? Llano. And then back to Gillespie would be like a nice 3-hour, 4-hour trip, maybe, including time eating food at the barbecue place. But anyway, just there, that's one itinerary of maybe 8 that we could come up with. There's a lot to get around and see. So it's going to be a fun time. And something, there's something that I'm reluctant to call it magical, but it does feel like there's something special each time we've had. I mean, even back to the first one to the Outer Banks, there was 5 of us there, and that was an awesome time. So, highly encourage you to come. Let's take a look at the belly washing.
Oh yeah, let's do that. A little bit of housekeeping for everybody. It's good to see everybody in the chat. Super excited to have you all here. You can connect with us. You can join our Patreon community from $1 a month, or you can even do a one-time annual Patreon, which a lot of people are taking advantage of. And I think that's nice because you get a little bit of a percentage off, and then also you don't have to think about it. But it still comes down to less than 25 cents per episode. So hopefully it's worth it. If it's not, geez. Yeah. I don't want to think about that.
Don't go down that.
Yeah.
Don't go down that rabbit hole.
That would be really rough.
You are valued.
Actually, if it's that bad, then you can pledge 25 cents per episode for us to stop. And if we reach a certain threshold, we'll just shut this whole thing down. So, you can access exclusive content, including we have check ride debriefs that we've done with members that are really valuable and interesting. We do our killing zone conversations. We talk about safety directly out of the book. There's a lot more content there that's now organized a little bit better on our Patreon that you'll be able to find it better. And so, yeah, of course, get access to our Discord. So 10% supports Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts. You can watch us live on YouTube Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Share your stories with us, midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. We read all the messages, and you might even hear yours on the show. Got a couple of good ones tonight coming up. And for everything Midlife Pilot Podcast, community, feedback, merch, dad hats, Big Texas Send t-shirts, and more, visit midlifepilotpodcast.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Ted, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah.
We might want to hear about the community updates. And I believe we got a few Patreon supporters this past week.
Speaking of 25 cents an episode, we've got some people that signed up. We'd like to thank them. At the Landomatic level, we have Wes W. At the Hershey Bar level, we have Jerome P. At the Beast level, we have Beast Stole Kit, I like to say. We have Andrew L., who upgraded. We've got Chris H., Bo D., Jeff R., and Trent G. It's nice to see people come in, and it's really fun seeing them come into Discord and see, and I've seen Ben do it. I've seen Mark do it. It's like, hey, who are you? What's your deal? When people come in, we love seeing people come in and where they're at, where they're physically located, and tell them, oh yeah, we know there's other people up by you, and seeing that get pointed out.
Really can't express how much we appreciate the Patreon support, and it just keeps coming, and it really does. I mean, it helps us put together these events and other things, but it does help us keep the lights on for what we're doing here. So, really appreciate it.
And it's really fun seeing the community interact and see topics coming up and those discussions forming. I saw one this week, and it was actually today. And because there is, you can date this to sometime, there is a big snowstorm in parts of the country, apparently. So the question was, here's my question for the group. If your aircraft had heavy snow on the horizontal stabs and was sitting on its tail, would you want another pilot to brush off that snow or just leave your plane be? That was started a good discussion. That was a good thought where it's like, okay, would it be helpful if I did that to someone else's plane, or would they want to murder me if I did that? So I like seeing that discussion, seeing people talk about how they'd feel about it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I used this rake and I got the snow off, no problem.
Yeah,
man, you wouldn't believe how hard that nose slammed down once I got the snow off. Yeah, and I guess it has to depend on the person who owns the plane. But for me, the only persons I would take it off of are the people that would be super particular about it and wouldn't want me to do it. Yeah, I'm just that lucky that way. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting discussion as well.
Well, your plane's in a tie down, Ben. What about you?
I would not.
Can we explain to you what snow is first?
Wait a minute. Snow can actually lift the tail of it. Well, if it's lifting the beast up with the bigger engine, that's going to be a hell of a snow. It depends on the person that's knocking the snow off and if they take enough care. I wouldn't want it on ours because it's very hard to get that nose up. When we were changing the tire on the front nose gear once, it was like they were adding more weights, and they were like, is this ever going to come up? And we finally got it up, but it just would make me a little nervous. If it was a 172 with a 140 horsepower engine in it, I'd be all right with it.
Well, let's just say, all right, but it's your plane. There's a foot of snow. You don't know who did it. You go out to the airport because you want to get the snow off your plane. Somebody's already done it. You don't know how they did it. How do you feel?
I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. And I'm going to inspect the tail and see.
I'm going to inspect the
Are there
nose
scrapes?
gear
Are there-
and the engine mounts and everything else. Yeah, if I was out there and they were helping me, absolutely. But I appreciate the sentiment and I like that. But you know, I don't know. There's just something to it that it's your baby and things can go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, and part of the conversation was, it's not really the end of the world to have that snow on there. It's not an emergency. Maybe it is if you get enough of it on your wing on the rest of it, but for the tail, it's so what that it's off the nose. At that point, you might be causing more damage by scraping it off. So,
just to hit on our friend Peter T in the chat, he goes, "Why isn't there any snow on the wings?" Peter, I'm sure there is snow on the wings, but it's not lifting the nose of your airplane up in the air. It's the snow on the tail that's doing that. So,
well, also the hazard with your plane, Ben, is if there's enough snow to have it sitting at a pitched up orientation, if the wind comes along and it's more than 15 knots, it's going to rotate.
if there's that much snow in Atlanta, Georgia, I'm not even getting to the airport. I'm not even going to know about it. So let's be real.
Yeah.
So,
well, as the phrase goes, Atlanta froze over. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Brian, we got some feedback.
Yeah, I got some good feedback this week. Just a reminder to you all that you can email us at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. And Ben will then take that email and no, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna rip on you anymore, Ben. The email organization is fantastic.
We've had meetings and subcommittee meetings, and it's been worked out.
There's been some therapeutic intervention. No, it wasn't crazy. It was just what is going on. Yeah, it's kind of like it's like your garage or something. You know where everything is, but if somebody walks in, it's like, can I just get a 10 millimeter or what's going on here? So cool.
On to the feedback.
Yeah. This one is from Skyward Scholar. And we did condense this one a little bit for time, but the meat of it is still there. Dear Ben, Brian, and Ted, I am a 49-year-old private pilot with an instrument rating based out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. In August/September of 2021, both of my parents passed from COVID approximately 15 days apart.
Whew, that's tough.
As a young man, I wanted to join the Air Force and become a pilot. My dad, who was former Air Force, did not want me to join the military. My mother insisted that I go to college. After my parents passed, I decided I would commit myself to some achievement that would bring them honor. At one of my son's baseball games in the fall of 2021, I struck up a conversation with another dad who happened to be a chief pilot. He finally looked at me and said, "Why don't you just go get your certificate?" I started flight training in January 2022. I passed my check ride following January 2023. I started my instrument training in June 23, and I passed my instrument check ride in May of 24. Wow. During my PPL training, I found Chris Moran's YouTube channel. I wanted to say thanks to all three of you for keeping the channel and community alive and well. I listen to y'all every week during my commute to and from the office. The Midlife Pilot Podcast has become a staple of my aviation community, and I'm happy to give back and support this amazing podcast. Best wishes, Skyward Scholar. What a story. Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. That's really cool. I like the persistency. He's a member of the family. He's like a lot of other people in our Patreon community. Got the Chris Moran drug introduced to them and just got them hooked early on. So we also got some more feedback. This one's been in the inbox for a little bit, and I apologize for not getting to it sooner, but that was my poor inbox management skills, which has since been corrected. and I own it. It was good to call me out on that. This is from Tango Whiskey Hotel. And he says, enjoy listening to your podcast. Good job encouraging new pilots. It is good to see a group who can provide advice and insight without tearing people down in the process. It is sad to see people on Facebook airplane groups be nasty to new pilots when they are asking questions. Why can't people be nice, encouraging? Who knows, you might save their life by providing good input. It's not unlike the difference between a good flight instructor and a bad flight instructor. A good instructor will say, that wasn't a bad landing, but I know you can do it better. Let's go around again. A bad instructor says, that landing sucked. I'm an older guy who got my license in 1978. I didn't fly for a long span, then got current a few years ago and bought a Cessna 182P model. Already like this guy. I typically fly once a week and absolutely love owning my own plane. I think you should do a show on how owning is safer than renting, which I can see the pros and cons of that. When I used to rent, I would drive an hour to airport to find that the windshield was covered in bugs and the plane was nearly empty. So while my wife waited in the car, I cleaned the windshield and filled up the plane in pre-flight and find that they have installed a different radio all while rushing. Now that I own, I can take my time doing my pre-flight because someone else isn't scheduled to rent it in an hour. The plane is always clean and full of fuel, and I know my plane. I mean, I really know my plane. If it makes a different sound, I notice it. Or if it acts different in any way, I notice it because I always fly the same plane. Owning is safer because you know your plane. And I won't argue with that. You do get to know it without a doubt. And along with that, I do notice different sounds and different things. So it's a great point to make. And we appreciate that feedback.
I was thinking that we talked about this before, but we hadn't. What we did in the past, and this will be in the show notes, what we did maybe around episode 20 or so, but it was flying one plane versus flying many planes. And that was Ben and I doing a kind of a guest podcast insert, which is kind of funny.
It's a foreshadowing.
But I think there's some arguments to be made that renting is safer. I'd love to hear people write in with what you feel about it. I think it's not all 100%. On the other hand, I own for a reason, but I do think there's some arguments to be made of the value of a rental plane that gets flown more and gets seen by a mechanic more. But be a good topic to discuss. We'll kind of add it to our hopper, and I'd love to see feedback from people with your opinions and your arguments either way.
I agree with the safety aspect of it, but I do have a desire to go fly different planes too in the same breath, just for the experience. So, which is kind of what we talked about in that episode.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough in anything aviation to draw an absolute and say owning is safer, period. There's too many variables, but I think generally his sentiment makes sense, in terms of just, you're not getting surprised by a bunch of things. You're attenuated to all the nuances of the airplane, and that really makes a massive difference. I can say for me, I had experiences where there was a period of time where I was renting kind of like a club plane-ish scenario, and I was the only one taking that plane on trips, and the only other people that flew it were using it for training. And I just remember driving an hour and something to go get this plane, and there were treads just showing on the bald tire. You have to really look hard. Just clear as day, massive swath of just actual treads, fraying, coming out. Yeah. And I was about to go on a big trip. It was actually when I was about to go to the Outer Banks.
Really?
And if I hadn't have found somebody on the field at that moment to change that tire, I wouldn't have been able to go. And I just felt like a lot of times when I was renting in various scenarios, I would just show up and something would be really obviously wrong, where it's a no-go, and no one would even whoever flew it before didn't make note of it, and certainly didn't act upon it, and then definitely didn't let anybody know.
Right.
So there's those kinds of things, but we'll scream about that some more maybe next week when we get some feedback about this. I think it's an interesting sort of bifurcation, but yeah,
I agree. Appreciate the feedback. Please email us at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. So tonight we wanted to talk about apps. I think Ted referred to this as Appy Hour. And I am, we're going to, Ted, why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of what we're going to be doing tonight?
Sure. We're going to touch on it first, but obviously the first apps that we think of are Garmin Pilot and ForeFlight, or just ForeFlight for the most part. But there are alternatives to that. And there are a lot of other apps that we use. And those are the ones that we really want to talk about. This is not an episode on ForeFlight. There are plenty of other things that we use and reasons for it. So I know a lot of us during training started with sectionals, and a lot of people still use sectionals or carry them as backups. I've used them in my plane. On the other hand, sure is a lot easier to just grab your phone or your iPad to do that. So yeah, we're gonna talk through that. At the top though, before we talk about that, one of the big risks of using these apps is relying on them. And so I wonder what you guys feel and what you do to mitigate the risk of everything being tied to, let's say, one iPad.
Brian, you want to go first?
What do I do to mitigate the risk of, are you talking about just for EFB?
Anything you're using in flight, at least. What's what do you do besides, but if your iPad was to overheat or the battery die, what are your options?
Are you saying that an Apple product could fail?
No.
So, I mean, I don't do anything to mitigate that risk. I just will be without an iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can pull up traffic on my Garmin 430. Is it ideal? No, it's not, but it will give me the general direction and, it's altitude relative to me. But now I make sure that I have my risk mitigation is I make sure I have a charger and a cable that work and that it's accepting a charge. And outside of that, if it's in the middle of July in Georgia, I will have the air vent blowing right on top of it, or I'll have it pulled out of the sun and on my lap, on my knee board. I mean, that's about the extent of my mitigation on that. So
I've only had one time where I got caught not having a taxi diagram on paper for a towered airport that I was at. And as soon as I got in the plane and fired it up, the iPad died because it was 197 degrees. And there was not enough airflow to solve for it. And so that was the only time. But I have... Well, and we'll get into this. This is actually a good segue in the sense that I'm a ForeFlight person, but I'm an Android person. So I don't have an iPhone as a second EFB. That's just another installation of my ForeFlight. So I use apps that we'll get into later that are free versions of EFBs on my Android, but it has made me... I've been tempted many times to go over to the Garmin side and see what's going on, because I would be able to cleanly resolve that. And our friend One Dull Geek, I know, did a very concentrated experiment on ForeFlight versus Garmin Pilot for a lot of the same reasons that I have. We both One Dull Geek and myself do not like Apple products and would like to, have everything be normal. And so he did a month, I think, with Garmin Pilot, and it did not take. And so I took that as maybe it's not for me, but I definitely did think about it. But Ben, I know that you are a Garmin Pilot user, so I want to say And I know that you've seen ForeFlight, and I know that you've probably used ForeFlight. What do you think in terms of cost? I mean, everything's expensive. Let's not even think about it from a cost. It's the most invaluable, one of the most invaluable things you can have in the airplane, right? So I don't care if one's $100 more a year than the other or what, who cares? Like if we're pinching pennies on EFB, then let's, so what would you say though, with respect to if I'm a ForeFlight person and you are a Garmin Pilot person, you've seen more of my world than I've seen of yours. What would you say to someone that is maybe Garmin curious?
Well, in fairness to me, I haven't looked at ForeFlight since probably 2019. Now it's crammed down my throat on every YouTube channel that is aviation related, and that's fine. They're dominant in the market. I think as far as capabilities is concerned, Garmin Pilot are going to do some things that they're going to be leapfrogging each other. I think it's all a matter of what you kind of grow up in, what you learn. There are some advantages in that if you have a Garmin panel and you're using Garmin Pilot, you can, it integrates with a lot of the Garmin products automatically. There's some seamlessness there, I guess. Database updates, things of that nature. I don't have, again, the Beast has 1980s technology in it, so we know we can't do that. But I know that's part of it. There's some. It used to be that ForeFlight's weather brief was top of the line, and Garmin's was all textual, and you could not. You might as well be reading Japanese. It was absolutely useless. And then Garmin bought flightplan.com, integrated their whole thing. And now I think it's better than what ForeFlight has because it is the weather brief that you get from Leidos. That's the company, and it is detailed, and I absolutely love it. From a moving map, they do a really good job of identifying NOTAMs, obstruction NOTAMs. So how you would check NOTAMs before you go, and they'll say obstruction tower at this grid coordinate with the light being out. Mm-hmm. Well, how much research or how much effort it would take to go figure out where these are? Well, Garmin Pilot just throws it on the map, so you know exactly where it is. Which, if you're flying IFR, that's really great to know. I'm not 100% sure of all the things. One Dog Geek would have more, and I think he might be providing feedback. I think he's still kind of on the fence. It just wasn't enough for him to make the move, I guess. But I think he really liked them both, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, you say that ForeFlight is shoved down your throat. On the other hand, there's all the YouTube influencers that have these beautiful Garmin panels that were given to them that run Garmin Pilot because of that great integration with Garmin Pilot. To me, that's the number one reason to use Garmin Pilot is that integration, especially as an IFR pilot. You gain the ability to run on Android, of course. There are other apps that some people use, especially if you're not flying much, if you're really on a budget. Some people use things like iFlight Planner and Avare. I use ForeFlight, and I finally went from a diehard Android user to finally getting an iPhone. So I've had my first iPhone since whenever the USB-C iPhones came out. That was enough reason for me not only to have that as a backup, but also I do a lot of kind of casual flight dreaming, just sitting there on my iPhone when I'm bored and looking, okay, well, how could I get to Tango 82? Let me plot these routes out without having to get out my flying iPad. Yeah. So, whatever. There are arguments on both sides of that. One of the other reasons that I'm a big fan of ForeFlight, there's that typical thing. It's like I use it because everybody else uses it. It was really great in training when I decided that I was going to use ForeFlight for my logbook, and instructors can send endorsements through ForeFlight to you. And since they're already using ForeFlight and you can get those endorsements, that's a lot better than having them write it down and taking a picture of it or whatever you need to do for an endorsement. So I've enjoyed it for that. It's also a good time to mention that as a logbook only alternative, if you want something digital, but you don't want to use ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot, my flight book is recommended by some people in our crowd. Mark Wendell Geek is one of those. The person that runs that it's a very responsive developer. And so he's added a lot of features. There are things that we can't get from ForeFlight, for instance, end of the year roll-ups about what new airports did you see, or all these just different ways to slice and dice the data.
I was actually as hype as ForeFlight's year-end review, what do they call it? Recap. As ubiquitous as that is, and it's really cool. When Mark showed me the one that came out of was it My Flight Book?
Yeah,
I was like, whoa, this is way more interesting, trending, representational aspects of your data set. I thought it was really, really cool. It didn't, as all these things are, right? It didn't look as cool, but the information was really, really cool. But I will get in when we get into flight analysis later. I will speak to something I found that does that and more.
Yeah. Well, Ben.
Yeah. The weather. Weather seems to be a very, very popular app. So we'll link all of the suggestions that we've gotten feedback in our show notes. There were a lot in there. I have found in the, oh, by the way, I'm coming up on my 7th anniversary of flying, of passing my private.
Nice.
I've always been fascinated by the weather and really trying to refine it. That's why I like Erica Gilbert's channel so much, because it really does kind of congeal what I thought I knew, and it's really good. But getting multiple sources, not just aviationweather.gov. As I mentioned before, Garmin pilots, and I know ForeFlight has a great weather debriefer. It takes you through the necessary steps to make sure you're covering all your bases. But you also don't know what it's going to be like if your flight is 8 days out. And there are different apps that people use. And I'll just tell you what I do. I use an app called Wonderground as my general weather app. Is it going to be raining tomorrow? Is it going to be 25 degrees in the morning? Like I just looked at before we got on the podcast, what's it really going to look like basically 10 days from now? What's the trend? And I'll watch that as the days go on to see if it stays the same or if it's changing rapidly. I get 3 days out, then I start looking at windy.com. I really like that. The website and the phone app work really well. The website is really cool. There's a route planning feature that you can do, and it'll show you cloud layers and the different weather, wind. I'm still learning it, to be honest with you. There's so much data on it that it's really kind of hard to keep up with. You can really get lost in it. As a matter of fact, one of the discussions in Discord was SKU-T diagrams and the use of them. And that was too much for me. But so I really like windy.com. Some other apps that some of our listeners have recommended is Weather Sport for their, they have some great features on there. And then, of course, the aviationweather.gov. But I do check in ForeFlight or in Garmin Pilot for me, but I know ForeFlight has as well as the MOS a couple of days out just to see if everything's staying the same. And then obviously I'll go with Garmin Pilot's weather brief, within 24 hours of the flight. And, I'm just trying to pull together that picture. And, it's taken me time to be able to build that routine and kind of build that habit really and kind of understand what's going on. But I felt like I've gotten fairly proficient at it.
Everybody has their own kind of way, you know?
Yeah.
There's so many, the good news is there's so many options. There's so many tools. There's so many ways to go about it. Obviously, we are huge fans of calling and getting proper weather briefings as well, which
100%.
The app that you would use for that it's called Phone on your iPhone or Android device. And then you just press in a series of buttons that are like a series of numbers that are uniquely assigned through the telephone system to a person. And then you can talk to a person. By the way, the last few times, pretty much whenever I'm about to call 1-800-WX brief, if my wife is around, I always put it on speaker and let her kind of go along for the ride of just the call, whether she's going to be on the flight or not, doesn't matter. It's just, I have talked to some absolutely wild characters, man. I don't know if you guys have the same experience, but just there was one guy I talked to where it was like he was doing remember that episode of Seinfeld where Kramer got the set of the TV show, right. And put it in his house and then started doing a late night talk show. Yeah. I had a guy on a weather brief one time that was essentially doing, I thought that a trick was being played on me or something, but he was wrapped up in this kind of show character thing. He gave me the most enthusiastic and well-delivered brief that I could have ever imagined. So
one more, let me jump in real quick.
Uh-huh.
My partner, a former airline pilot, uses that service before every flight.
Yeah.
An airline captain of 30 years of flying. That's how he gets his weather brief, is calling 1-800 weather brief.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as midlifers and people that are not yet generationally totally afraid to talk to humans, we should try to keep these places in operational use. But yeah, so I always just want to highlight that is the best app of all for weather I have found. But one other app that I'll mention to you, and by the way, Windy is so cool. It is hard to use in terms of, I find the interface to be a little frustrating, and I find it's too good. There's a lot going on, and it's hard for me to figure out how to get things to show the way that, I'm constantly just like, no, I want to look at the HRRR model. No, I want to look at the Mediagram. No, I don't want to see that. I want to see, and there's certain aspects of its UI that I find very frustrating. At the same time, it's like, wow, my phone's vibrating when the lightning strikes or whatever. It's kind of cool, but it's also like, okay, can you just make it where I can use it? Instead of giving me like a sensory overload of weather. But the one thing I'll mention that is obviously more near term than anything is aero weather for METARs and general station weather. I love it because it's very simple.
Yeah.
And you can add in secret. Well, often what I do, for instance, is, you have your favorite airport, which is generally your home airport. And then you have maybe surrounding airports. You can kind of do north, south, east, west, near range, and then further range, north, south, east, west or something. And you can get a really good, quick glance of exactly what's going on with the weather regionally and get a sense of where it's coming from and where it's going and what it is without necessarily having to fire up a whole thing when you're really in the middle of it. And I use it a lot while if I've flown to a location and then now I'm out doing something, I maybe have gone to eat or I'm visiting with friends or something. I'll do my proper flight plan again, when I get back to the FBO and all of that. But while I'm just trying to keep an eye on things quickly without necessarily getting into the wormhole of another app, I really love AeroWeather for being able to just quickly have a customizable list of color-coded weather for just what is basically going on. What are the winds doing? Quick, easy way to sort of see a weather picture. So AeroWeather, I'm a big fan of. So with all that said, unless you guys have anything else on weather?
Yeah. I love AeroWeather because it's simple and you just have your one page of what you need to see immediately. And I usually just keep that set to my local airports, and where you live and why one airport might be showing poor and the rest are okay. You can get those quick glances. I've also used it on long cross countries where you set all the airports in order of where you're flying through. And especially I'm talking like 5 to 10 hour trips. And you set that because you can just keep an eye on it.
Your en route weather and your alternates and
know if it's going to change or not. Yeah. I wanted to speak on Weather Spork though. And the one feature that it has that's really handy, it's good for seeing the next, for instance, 24 hours at a given airport. What it's really good at though is showing cloud layers. So if you, and they use their own kind of predictive model, so it's not an official model, but it's really handy if you know you're dealing with fog or you know you're dealing with low clouds and you want to see how you expect that's going to improve for the next 24 hours. So it's a really good one in a very unique way. So I want to speak on that. And finally, we have to mention METAR AF, which is Brian of Just Plain Silly. That's a great one. Look it up. It's humorous, somewhere between a 13-year-old and an adult, which is perfect for many of us. So it's nice for a humorous view of the current METARs. So yeah, on to flight analysis. Brian, you want to get us started on that?
Yeah. So there in our Discord community, it has been on fire lately because there's been a whole new wave of people being indoctrinated into or just exposed to the magic of FlyStow. And I want to talk about FlyStow first in terms of flight analysis and tools you can use to improve and track what's happening. We could do a whole episode easily on FlyStow, and maybe we will at some point. But the main thing I want to tell people is if you're not using FlyStow, you are missing out. And it is a website. The price is right. Wouldn't you say, Ben?
It's within my budget, $0.
The zero budget. And there's something about when a tool is this good and it's free, it almost makes you feel like something's wrong. And maybe there will be at some point. But for right now, it is incredible. And I have to say that if you've probably used in the past Cloud Ahoy or functions like that, you basically upload your track logs and then it processes them and reads them and then gives you multiple ways of looking at it. It automatically breaks up all your phases of flights. You can analyze everything pretty well. It is so deep. There's no way we can cover it right now, but I'll just say that one of my favorite things about using it is sometimes you have flights where, because we're always gaining experience. And as you gain experience, you sometimes have questions or maybe certain things are questionable that you've done in the past, but you can go back historically and go, wait, well, what happened what was my takeoff roll from that airport the last time? And what was different? The amount of data that you can get and the way that you can visualize it, and you can enable a playback mode, you can actually see other targets from ADS-B in the replays. You can see the weather in the replays, albeit delayed a little bit, like all weather. But it's just incredible the amount of data and insights you can get on every flight. And I look at every flight I ever do in FlyStow at some point, maybe not immediately, but I will go back to it at some point. Quick example of something I did even just today on the notion of going back through an older flight and kind of debriefing it. I was debriefing the last time I was in Marfa, and I was taking off from the Marfa airport with some friends to go do some sightseeing at Big Bend while I was there. Density altitude was pretty high, and I had 2 passengers and full fuel. And, my performance calculator, it all worked out to be what I thought it would be. But there's something about when you debrief it, because when I was doing the takeoff, I was curious, like, what is the longest takeoff roll that I've ever had? And sure enough, it was that flight, and it was 3,100 feet, and my ground speed was almost 90 knots, at rotation.
Yeah.
And so it was just such a great way to analyze density, altitude, and really look deeper at the effects of it. I was within a safe parameter. I wasn't concerned, but on that actual flight, it's amazing how the extra seconds it takes to get going combined with the faster ground speed is alarming. So it was nice to sort of have a data set that I can visually look at. You can replay the takeoff and everything. Yep, that's what I was seeing. So anyway, Flysto is an incredible debriefing tool. And Ben, so obviously as an instrument rated pilot, I would imagine that it is next level valuable for that. So tell us about that.
Yes. I tried to upload my fan flight, which was some heavy IMC, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, the ADSB stopped tracking as I was coming into Atlanta. So I've been going through my logbook to find out I haven't loaded up one since then, but I did. And I mentioned this on the Discord server. I went down a rabbit hole of uploading a bunch of them. And I did my one when I flew into Hartsfield. Because the main reason for it is I wanted to see the traffic that was coming in and leaving, all of it, the full picture of the traffic.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. I was worried about having somebody coming up on me pretty hard. And the controller said, the next plane is 10 miles behind you. And I was like, he's probably just saying that to make me run. For some reason, I didn't trust it. Yeah. And I went back and looked at it, and it was literally, I could see it was 8 miles out. I mean, the data's right there.
Yeah. And you can see how fast they were going and where they went, where they were coming from,
That's exactly right. You get everything you wanted to know. And I have been looking at, comparing different landings at the same airport. And it's one of those things that I could find myself starting at 8 p.m. at night. And the next thing I know, it's 4 a.m. in the morning. It's just, and without even knowing it. So I'm with you. It is definitely one of those that will change your perspective.
The last time I flew through DFW, I pulled that up and I put it on playback like at 5X or something, and then just did a screen record of the video, and you can see the swarm of I'm sort of, it's like crossing the street with your eyes closed is what it looks like. All the traffic going around me, but yeah. So
you just send it, and you're like, I had no idea all this traffic that was around me and diverting. And it's you're talking, you're on flight following at that time, but it is that feel. Ben, how are you uploading? What data are you uploading to Flysto?
So from Garmin Pilot, I can load it up into a GPX file.
Okay, so your track log or out of your logbook entry, yeah. So Flysto is at flysto.net. That's FLYSTO.net. They have apps for Apple and Android. I don't use their apps. I just use their website. And you can send logs to it from a zillion different sources. It can be files that you've downloaded from ADSB Exchange, things from your logs, things from your avionics. My favorite source is from my avionics, because then I have my actual airspeeds, not just ground speeds. But it's really handy for that. And if you haven't used it before, when you first upload some logs, you'll need to identify your plane because they need your V speeds. And then when you upload track logs, the traffic comes in. It just takes a little while. So you may upload your file and 15 minutes later, all of a sudden there's traffic on your map. So they don't really explain that. It's just one of those things where it just like mysteriously shows up over time. But that's definitely one of the great things is going back and saying, I really thought that traffic was close, or, what pattern were they flying? How did they get there? And to go see that is fantastic. So that's the advantage of that. Now,
so there's another app that we haven't mentioned yet that I use, and believe it was mentioned earlier in the chat by our friend Nathan, but I have it on my phone, and it's the liveatc.net app.
Of course. Yeah.
And it used to embarrass me to admit to this, but it's kind of soothing when you've listened through all your podcasts and you're just kind of tired of listening to people like me talk. and there's nothing good on the radio, it's nice on a long drive for me to tune into Atlanta, Tracon, or even Hartsfield, the tower there.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was going through training for instrument, I listened to a lot of Charlie's, Birmingham and Chattanooga specifically, to pick up on IFR clearances and also the clearances, the landing clearances or the approach clearances is what I'm trying to come up with. And it really did. It's like osmosis. It just kind of seeps into your brain while that stuff is playing in the background. And also you can go to their website and download archived. If you can timestamp where, let's say they get mad at you for some reason, if you can timestamp it, you can actually go back and listen to it and try to, figure out what happened.
It's pretty amazing. I wish they had a better interface for getting at things. It's a little clumsy and it looks a little bit like it's like an Angel Fire website. Remember those? They're one step away from having rotating GIFs of, fire breathing in the background or whatever. With the
HTML 3.2 is great. Yeah.
But it is great. And the value of that is huge. So we've got to start our descent here, but I wanted to say real quick that the other missing piece here, and by the way, all these apps, all of the things we're talking about, and all of the things that people have brought up in the community, we have combined it into a master list, categorized with URLs and information, and we're going to be putting it on our website, and we'll share that with the community. And if you want to see it on our website, it'll be there in the next day or something. But we'll just keep a massive list of all the things. They're not endorsements. They're not. We assume no liabilities, but
and we're not endorsed either.
Yeah. And we're certifiable. But one other last thing I wanted to throw out there is I've been using AI to do a lot of really interesting things that I don't have another tool to do. Now, for instance, I know that savvy aviation is a thing and that you can get really rich data analytics, views, all this stuff. I don't have an engine monitor. I don't have all the tools, but you know what? I have AI and a little bit of time. And so, for instance, one of the things that I did this year is I took all of the Blackstone oil sample reports that we got for the whole year for our plane, and I fed all those into AI through a series of prompts. Basically, more or less was just saying, tell me what you see relative to any trends or analysis relative to, specifically to what's in these reports. Don't make anything up, AI, right? Like I don't need you inventing information. And I really wanted to put a stress on a collective view of wear patterns, oil consumption, and some other things. And I was able to feed it into AI and got just an absolutely beautifully, I was able to prompt it into a place where I had a beautifully mapped out visual graphs with, you can hover and do all the things and tells you all these things, iron, aluminum, copper, lead, all visually mapped, viscosity, insolubles, the flash point, assessments on wear patterns and oil condition and contaminants and everything, and just got a whole sense of what is the total picture if you just smush together all of those oil sample analyses and then gave me something back to kind of look at. Really, really fascinating. The other thing is I took all of our data for tack time and for squawks and for all the things, and I coupled all this stuff together, and I made essentially like a full report of the health of the plane, trends on usage of the plane, how many average, how many hours does the plane partner fly versus what I do, what, oil consumption patterns over seasons, just a bunch of stuff. So I say this with an extremely cautionary air quote, whatever else, asterisk. AI is a really neat tool. I use Claude mostly, but you can create artifacts things that are coded that you can, share, or whatever. But it's been really fascinating. So I think you guys might have seen some of the stuff I've been throwing in the community. I just find it fascinating because it gives me some of these points of view aggregate that I don't have sometimes when you have all these momentary reports.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting proposition. I do believe that maybe Katie implanted a computer chip into your head and you're like being taken over by AI, and that's why you're promoting it so much. But no, seriously, I agree. The insight that you can gain from it, that's the whole point of AI, is drawing out information that would take us forever to pull out, that it can pull out in seconds. So I couldn't agree with you more. We're getting on time, so I want to wrap things up. There's a lot in the show notes. The chat's been really busy tonight. We haven't been able to get to a lot of it. I do want to call out one thing, though. Very, very important. Our friend Alpha Juliet is joined us in the chat. He's out of town. Yep. Tomorrow, he's taking his commercial checker. So
very cool.
The entire midlife pilot community knows you got this, AJ, but good luck tomorrow. Not that you need it, but
no whammies. Also,
no whammies.
Adam is asking in the chat, does Flysto sync videos? Yes, it does. It does not do it in the same way that Cloud Ahoy does, which I know upset Mark because you're not uploading it you're just putting a YouTube link in there, and apparently it's a little different, but yes, you can.
Yep. Cool. So best of luck to AJ. Let's see. There's a lot out there, and know that we're not being paid by any of these companies. So use at your own risk. Don't forget to let your friends know to leave us a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can join us Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, youtube.com at Midlife Pilot Podcast, at youtube.com at Midlife Pilot Podcast. Sorry about that. Gentlemen, anything else? I've got some very wise words if we don't have anything else to cover.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
I think this is very relevant for tonight's subject matter. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad.
There's a little bit of fruit salad going on in here.
Definitely. Guys, thanks for joining me tonight. The chat, everybody in the chat, we thank you very much for joining us. Signing off, episode 110 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Good night, everybody.